This is a 1919 facsimile of Joseph Scriven's own handwriting. The famous story says his fiancée drowned on the eve of their wedding. No contemporary account of that accident is known to survive, but this page does. At the top of the little page are 3 words: "Pray without ceasing." Below them are 16 handwritten lines, the early shape of the hymn the world would know as "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." The original manuscript's present location is unknown. What survives publicly is Edward Caswell's carefully documented reproduction. But the familiar hymn has 24 lines, and the familiar story behind it begins with a young woman drowning on the eve of her wedding while Scriven watches from the opposite bank. That scene has been preached, printed, animated, and repeated for generations. There is only one problem. No contemporary account of the accident is known to survive. Her name has been lost. The horse, the river crossing, the opposite bank, those details belong to later tradition, not to a record anyone has been able to place beside the event. The famous tragedy may be a legend, but the handwriting is real, and if we follow the documents instead of the polished story, Joseph Scriven's life does not become less sorrowful. It becomes more human. Joseph Medlicott Scriven was born in Banbridge, County Down, on the 10th of September 1819. He studied at Trinity College, Dublin, and received his degree in 1842. Between those years, he trained at Addiscombe Military College, preparing for service abroad. The official explanation for his withdrawal was that his health made him unfit for a tropical climate. Those are modest facts. A date, a degree, a line in an institutional record. And then the biographies usually give us the scene that seems to explain everything. Scriven is engaged to be married. The day before the wedding, his fiancée is thrown from a horse while crossing the River Bann. She drowns. He sees her body from the far bank. It is almost too perfectly constructed. Love, water, helpless witness, exile, him. But history does not owe us a perfect first act. A local Church of Ireland account in Banbridge treats the drowning as the way the story is told, not as a documented event. It says the woman's name is lost and no contemporary account of the accident survives. The close biography published in 1895, only 9 years after Scriven's death and drawing heavily on his friend James Sackville, does not tell the Irish fiancée story at all. The earliest opened printed source we have found for the core claim came from the hymn singer Ira Sankey in 1906, 63 years after the event was said to have happened. Sankey wrote that she drowned accidentally on the eve of the wedding. He did not identify his source. That does not prove there was no fiancée. It does not prove no woman drowned. It tells us what we may not do: give a nameless later tradition the lighting and certainty of an eyewitness memory. We do not know her name. We do not know the precise place. We do not have the accident account. And we do not have a securely identified portrait of Scriven either. The image often circulated as his face is not safely identified. A 1919 writer who documented the surviving manuscript stated it plainly. No portrait of him was known to exist. So let us leave the portrait frame empty. Let the page speak instead. Scriven first came to Canada West in 1845 and joined friends among the Plymouth Brethren. After a return journey, institutional sources place him back in Canada in 1847. He would spend years teaching and preaching, eventually settling in the countryside near Bewdley and Port Hope. He taught. He preached. For 2 or 3 years in Brantford, he ran a private school. Later, he became a tutor in the household of Robert Lamport Pengelly. The documented outline is quiet but consistent. He chose a life of teaching, preaching, and service, and he never became a famous author while he lived. Near the Pengelly household, Scriven met Eliza Catherine Roach, spelled Roach in some local sources. This engagement is not a nameless tradition. Eliza is identified in the historical record as his fiancée, and in August 1860 she died. A family note says she had suffered from consumption for 2 years. Consumption was the old name commonly given to tuberculosis, an illness that could turn breath itself into labor. Later stories connected her death to an immersion baptism in cold water, sometimes saying the chill caused pneumonia and killed her. The family evidence does not support that neat chain. It describes a long illness, so Eliza's death belongs in Scriven's story, but not as another cinematic accident we can stage to explain a hymn. She was a real woman. She was ill for a long time. She died in August 1860, and Scriven grieved. The remarkable thing is that the earliest surviving form of "What a Friend" may already have existed before that loss. In 1919, Edward Caswell described a small manuscript book that had belonged to John Charles Bennett of Brantford. Scriven had given it to him during the early 1850s. On the inside of the back cover, in Scriven's own hand, was the poem headed, "Pray Without Ceasing." 16 lines. The later printed hymn has 3 stanzas of 8 lines, 24 in all. That difference matters. It tells us the song did not necessarily arrive in the single finished moment that later storytellers wanted. There may have been an early Brantford form, then private copies, then revision, then print. Scriven's close friend James Sackville gave us the clearest near-contemporary clue. In a letter dated January 8, 1887, less than a year after Scriven's death, Sackville wrote that Scriven sent 1 copy to his own mother and gave another to Sackville's mother about the year 1855. Years later, Sankey said Scriven had composed it to comfort his mother in a time of special sorrow. Those sources support a tender image. A son far across the Atlantic, sending his mother words about carrying everything to Jesus in prayer. They do not tell us she was dying. They do not call the poem a letter. They do not show the full 24-line hymn written in one sitting. And the dates make another popular version unlikely. If a copy was already being shared around 1855, the hymn cannot simply be the product of Eliza's death in 1860. Grief may have deepened the words for Scriven over time. We cannot measure that. What we can see is a text moving through relationships before it moved through publishers. 1 copy for his mother, 1 for another mother, a private prayer carried by hand. The first confirmed printing came in 1865. H.L. Hastings included the 3-stanza text in a collection called Social Hymns, Original and Selected. It was anonymous. 4 years later, Scriven published a book of his own, Hymns and Other Verses. It contained 115 texts. What a Friend We Have in Jesus was not among them. That absence is one of the most eloquent documents in the story. The hymn was in circulation. Its author had a book, and the famous hymn was not in it. Perhaps Scriven did not consider the private text his to promote. Perhaps the publication history had already escaped him. The sources do not tell us why. Then a melody found the words. Charles Crozat Converse composed the tune in 1868. In 1870, words and music appeared together in a book called Silver Wings. Converse was credited under the pseudonym Carl Reeden. This matters because another familiar claim says Ira Sankey was the first to pair Scriven's words with Converse's melody. He was not. The pairing was in print 5 years before Sankey and P.P. Bliss placed it in their enormously influential Gospel Hymns and Sacred Songs in 1875. What Sankey did was make the combination travel. But even then, Scriven's name did not travel with it. The 1875 hymnal attributed the words to the Scottish minister Horatius Bonar. An anonymous text had acquired the right melody and the wrong author. Only in the final year of Scriven's life did a Hastings collection explicitly credit Joseph Scriven, circa 1855. The attribution appeared again in Gospel Hymns number 5 in 1887. The world was learning his name just as his own story was closing. In August 1886, Joseph Scriven was 66 years old. He was physically ill and deeply low in spirit. James Sackville found his friend in a condition he later described as prostrate in mind and body and brought him home. Near midnight, Sackville left Scriven resting and remained in the next room. At about 5 in the morning, the room was empty. Searchers looked for him through the day. Shortly after noon, his body was found in water near Sackville's grist mill. And here too, later storytellers have wanted certainty. Some call it an accident. Some call it suicide. Local speculation even preserved darker possibilities. The Dictionary of Canadian Biography cautiously suggests that Scriven may have gone toward a nearby spring, fainted or fallen, and entered the mill's spillway. But that is a reconstruction. There was no eyewitness. No open source settles the intention. Sackville, the friend in the next room, refused to pretend that he knew. He wrote, "A veil of mystery hangs over the last hours of my beloved brother's life on earth." It is an honest sentence. The first famous water tragedy in Scriven's story is a later tradition without a surviving contemporary account. The final water tragedy is documented as a body found, but its cause remains unresolved. Reality gives us grief without symmetry. So what remains when the legend is removed? Not nothing. We have a young man whose health redirected his life. We have an immigrant teacher and preacher. We have Eliza, a documented fiancée, dying after a long illness. We have a son sharing words with his mother across an ocean. We have a 16-line manuscript that became a 24-line hymn. We have an anonymous printing, a melody under a pseudonym, a mistaken attribution, and finally a name restored. And we have a friend at the end of the story, brave enough to say that he did not know. The documentary version is less polished. It does not let one terrible day explain every line. It does not let us look into Scriven's face. It does not tell us exactly when private prayer became public hymn. The uncertainty also changes how the words sound. They do not offer an explanation for suffering. They offer somewhere to carry it. Have we trials and temptations? The question assumes that we will. Is there trouble anywhere? The hymn does not answer no. Its answer is an action. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Sometimes honest history does not take sorrow away. It takes away the choreography, and it leaves us with the words a real person chose when life would not explain itself. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful, who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden, cumbered with a load of care? Precious Saviour, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there.